Did that work? All right, that was weird. Just one of those things where you hit a button and it didn't do the thing that you think it's gonna do. Okay, where am I? Try to make this a little easier to see. All right, I think that I have too many desktops open, but that's fine. This is all This Week in Bevy stuff, so we'll get rid of that. Got Blender, got tiled, Xcode, and then we've got, where's the terminal? Oh, it's over here. Terminal on the right page. Hey Xavier, how's it going? Hey Prince, nice to see you. Nice to see you. Hello difficulty. Or medium. All right, so let's start off with just running this. I'm gonna run it with Xcode because I think that's a little bit more interesting. So this is the current build, and this is the demo map that I'm using to kind of just debug depth texture issues. So you can see that it's like mostly working, which is sick. Like this is awesome. It is, for the most part, doing the right thing, except for like small places like that. So you see a little bit of like, I don't know, clipping and then maybe a little bit later and stuff like that, whatever. I don't know that I'm ever going to fully get rid of that. I think that the like, I don't know what to call this, the little stick that this person is carrying going behind this wall is just always going to happen. At least for the moment anyway. Unless I do a depth texture on this player sprite too, which I don't know if I want to do. But there's a whole depth texture on all of this stuff. So if I put the character like here, and we go to Xcode and we capture a GPU workload, and we scroll, this is the current depth texture. So the whole thing is 2D, it's all sprites, and this is what we're getting for... Can I full screen this? So we've got a couple modifications to Bevy, a couple modifications to Bevy ECS tile map. You can see every tile has its own depth in the scene. Even there's multiple layers in the scene as well. So there's a floor layer in this one, and there is a layer on top of that. The world that I was working with before has like 6 layers or something like that. So it's working out pretty well. You can see the colors are pretty much in the right place for the depth. Things that are next to each other are pretty close to the same color. I am trying to make sure that tiles that are in the right position for the Y sorting are always in front of other things. And this is not fully done. So it's, you know, like mostly working, but not perfect. Good enough to continue with anyway. Hey Ryan, how's it going? What is my HDR doing on my end? What do you mean by on my end? Do you mean on the stream or in the game? So this is mostly working, but you can see there's a couple of issues, like on this corner, for example. And this may be a rendering thing, this may be something else kind of thing or whatnot. Hey Steve, how's it going? Are you Pokemon Going today, Ryan? Okay, so that's all that. I think that the depth stuff is something I can just kind of commit for the moment, because it's mostly working. I don't think that's all the source code. Cool. My guess on the last week's 16-bit depth per channel issue is the image crate reads correctly 16 bits, but continues to assume 256. So you think it's an image crate issue? Yeah, I do need to look into that. Maybe I'll find an issue on my repo and I will. Because that was super strange. And I didn't dig in deep enough to know whether check stream from, I don't know, what was last week? 22nd? Just as a reminder for me to file that issue somewhere. That does make sense. I do think it's a bug in something. I don't know if it's a bug in the way that Montage is scaling the values when you go from 8 to 16 for some reason, or if it's, like you said, the image crate reading or something. Yeah, you are. No IRL stream today, mostly driving. Heading out soon. Yeah, cool. Well, best of luck on your shiny hunts. Or I guess you're not really shining hunting right now, are you? You're doing level grinding. Okay, so maybe we do something like a pause menu today. I don't know. There's a whole bunch of stuff that I feel like I need to do. One of the things I could do is do more tiles. So right now, let's not show the depth one. I'm fake rendering depth textures like this. And then my Blender skills are not great. And then I can render it out to having some material on it. Right now I'm using kind of like a clay material. So this is where the tiles are coming from for the map that we just saw. I don't think that I actually want, like, we're not going to have this character specifically in the game. This is just a placeholder. And I think that using this character has kind of set me up in a way where I'm thinking more about casting stuff. And I don't think that casting is really what I want to be doing for movement and for attacks. So maybe we open up the Blender file and see if there's a better demo character to use. If the crate was still taking 256 as white, every pixel would probably be 100% white now. And you know what I didn't do? I didn't grab my controller. Just technically right here, but connected to the wrong computer. Oh well, it's fine. So let's take a look at maybe one of the other characters. I have to find it. Oh, why do I have my light mode on? That's why everything feels weird. There we go. So we've got a couple of different options. I think that some of these will probably have kind of what I want to work on next. So this little dude has swords, but we're using the druid at the moment. I think the druid choice was the wrong choice. I think I should have went with the knight or something. And I don't want to do major modeling work on stream, so why is this not have the blend files? Oh, there's the source. Source animated. Save changes to that. Let's see what we've gotten here. Per and for each are basically the same. There's no significant difference. Well, there is difference, but you know, to an English speaker, it's the same thing. Let's see, lie down. It still has the same animations. Interesting. So it actually looks like all of the animations for all of the characters are the same animations, which I guess makes sense because they're all using the same skeleton. So I guess not all animations are meant to be used with every character. But yeah, some of these look a little bit better in terms of. I was thinking about doing like a sword hit today, but I would have to render this out first. How much rigging have I done myself? Not a whole lot. It doesn't seem that particularly hard. It's like just creating the skeleton, binding the skeleton to the mesh, controlling the influence of where it actually modifies and stuff. It's just probably more than I want to do on stream. So maybe we just don't do the character change. I should load up the other map and see what it looks like with the depth. I actually haven't done that, so let's see. Lib. I think that's the wrong lib. I want the Ivy lib because that's where our assets are. And then comment this out. Actually, I don't have the depth textures for the other map, so the other map won't even work. Yeah, the 8-bit 16-bit issue was definitely very weird. Okay, so we have our punching bag down in the bottom corner at least. I think that the character probably doesn't matter all that much. I do think the movement is super janky still, currently. Oh, I also don't have the Z indexing on this little beanbag. I just realized, well, I didn't just realize, but I just remembered that I'm going to have the z-indexing logic on everything that I spawn into the scene, which is fine. I can probably move that into the shader. Yeah, because if I'm going to have keyboard control, doing any kind of casting or whatever, like any kind of projectile that isn't... I have to aim with the mouse, basically. Which is fine, but it presents some interesting, like, where does the player face if the mouse is over here and you're running that way? I wonder what Hades does for that scenario. In any case, let's get rid of some of these logs because they are pretty noisy. This is my WGSL stuff. Let's just drag this up here because I'm not going to work on the depth stuff right now. Get rid of this. I think I have one more. Yeah, one more debug. We could do kind of a bossy kind of thing. I think there's no real like attack right now that is satisfying to use in any way. So that is something that is going to have to be resolved. I'm pretty happy with the way all the technical stuff is working out. I feel like I can actually do some artistic direction now that I've got the depth stuff working. But the actual interacting with enemies, like for example, this fireball that we have that we implemented on a previous stream is just not, it's not going to be satisfying to use. I guess technically it fires fast enough, so you could just be in a bunch of different positions. You should probably be able to move while firing, which is not the case currently. So maybe I start with that. Let's see. Player, systems. And then we've got running, healing, idling, dashing. I guess running is where that logic goes. ISO direction, velocity, velocity. I think that's it. I actually feel like the movement should be a separate system from the attacking, but maybe not. Does the depth shader look the same as the textures you bake in Blender? Yes and no. Let's see. I can show you the textures. So this is the tile map. It's a very simple tile map. It's just a couple of debug elements. And this is the depth texture. So the depth texture for everything is basically a Y sort visualized. It's not actually a depth texture, so it's not distance from the camera. I don't know if that's going to come back to bite me in the future. But I could do actual depth from camera if I wanted to. It just means that like the top left corner here of this archway is closer to the camera than the bottom. So TBD on whether I'm actually generating these depth textures in a way that is acceptable. The way I'm doing it in Blender is definitely with an orthographic camera. So it shouldn't matter that much. But then I'm doing some math on them too. So it's not exactly that. It's not just pull that in. It is, right now it's this logic. And this logic is a little bit weird because it's taking a lot of different things. And I don't know that it's necessarily the right thing. I've clearly done a lot of experimenting here with a lot of comments out. So I've got like the chunk Y index and the chunk index for this map. And for the way that I'm using Bevy ECS tile map, everything is a 1x1 chunk. Just to make the math easier on myself for the moment. So every individual tile gets its own spot in the index. I'm using a weight for each of these. So the Y index is highly weighted. Layer Z is the world position over the number of layers. That's because the tile map layers come in as either, in this case, it's 2 layers. So it'll either be 0 or 1. So I'm dividing that by 2 to get 0 and 0.5 to be able to have a 0 to 1 value that I then use in this calculation down here and can weight myself. The Y index is the same thing, but for the Y position in the world. And then we've got the depth here. So the depth, we just take one of the channels from the depth and we add it in alongside everything else. So the idea here is basically to like use the chunking to determine higher order and then gradually get more specific until we're down to the depth texture. Yeah, the animation mixing stuff is definitely 3D, and we are not doing 3D. Partially, we're not doing 3D because of the scoping stuff, right? So, like, I didn't want to start a large 3D project before some of the animation changes went in. Also, I was probably playing maybe too much Hades when I started this. Seems like you'll have to have a shader that can artificially measure and artificially create XYZ measurement for the character shader. Yeah, I mean, I already have that. That's like you're effectively looking at it, right? Like, so the way that I'm doing the character right now is just using the Z position, and the Z position is being set in this system, which is using the same calculation that we're using here. So this calculation for calculating the depth of something on the screen, or the depth of a pixel on the screen, is the same calculation that I've copied out to the Rust code, which I'm also using for the character. The only difference between the character and everything else is the character doesn't have like a depth texture on it or a faked depth texture. So things like this will kind of happen where technically that like thing is on my right arm past the left side of the door, and then it clips through. But I don't think I care about that, honestly. I think that this is an acceptable level of jank overall. Especially since this isn't going to be the character that we use, right? So I don't want to get too specific into making this character fit, if that makes sense, until I actually have the character that I'm going to use for the real game. Why am I logging out tile map size still? This, get rid of that. But I'm very happy with the depth texture stuff. I know it's not particularly easy to wrap your head around, I guess. And it's not particularly like, you know, it's not God rays or volumetric fog or something. It's just like tile sorting or pixel sorting on the screen. But I really think it enables a significantly higher level of artistic choices. So my tiles can be larger now because I can walk through the middle of them, which means I can have, you know, bigger worlds if I want to. I can put more things in these tiles without worrying about them overlapping in weird ways, etc. Let's see. Let's go back to player system. This is doing the velocity. It kind of feels like the velocity should be in a different system. Especially if I'm going to be moving and shooting at the same time, it feels like running and taking action are different states that can be occurring at the same time. I think I will just deal with that. We don't have too many extra states. So where's our attacking state? Here's attacking. So we're setting linear velocity to 0 here, which means that probably I can just do this. ISO direction facing base run speed. I'm not using the base run speed. Interesting. So I'm fine with a little bit of duplication in the logic here. So I should be able to now move and shoot at the same time, which is a little weird. Also, the casting animations are a little long for what I want them to be. But if you're like running around and you're like cast and run cast and not being mathematically correct is bad for your OCD. Sorry. The depth probably does have a mathematically correct solution. I just don't know it yet. I would fix it if I knew the fix. Let's put it that way. These animations and stuff aren't exactly swappable. I am generating some metadata from Blender, putting that into a JSON file effectively, and importing that when I load the sprite sheet and stuff. So that's what this MDA thing is. So when I get the spellcast shoot animation, then I get those animations for every direction. And we can kind of play them down here. I should probably not call these trigger on anymore. There's a new thing in Bevy 0.14 called observers, and they have a trigger. So I probably want to rename this to something else so that it's not so why does that have a warning on it? I probably want to rename this something to something else so that it's not overlapping. I also might potentially move away from this state system that we're using. It's working fine for now, but states get a lot more robust in 0.14. So we have not just regular states, but computed states and substates. So based on what is happening, we could trigger different systems. Let's make it so that this thing down here can take damage. One of the other things that I've been thinking about is Oh, it moves you forward when you fire if you're not moving. That's not good. That is a bug. Velocity, Linval. We're just using facing here. We're just using facing, but I actually kind of need player input. It would make eclipses look funny. Oh, if you propose the math to NASA Ames. Everything would clip. And clip in weird ways. Okay, where do I have... I guess running then is not using player input currently. Why did I do that? It's just using the facing. Which I guess makes sense for running. You can only kind of move in one speed when you're running. Which should probably be a little bit faster, honestly. Where is this? Base run speed? ISO direction times base run speed. Let's make the base run speed probably something way lower than it is right now, but we'll see. You do so much name overlapping when you're doing stuff. Asset loader, asset loader, asset loader, asset loader. Oh, wow, that is... So our little character is absolutely too fast at this point. Let's change it to 2. Should also probably do some camera movement. Okay. There's like very slight hitching, and I'm not exactly sure why. I'll have to look into that. Anyway, this speed feels better to run at. Maybe a little bit slower. Maybe a run button. Maybe this is sprint speed. But I feel like the walking speed before was way too slow. All right, so if we've got this and we're firing, I guess let's go back and undo that. This is running, right? Cool. Let's go back and undo the linear velocity change here. So that we can kind of stand and hit that enemy punching bag. And then I'll come back and I'll do the change I actually want to make. Okay, so the punching bag is handled where? Where did I put that? Probably in main, right? I haven't refactored the stuff that we put in main yet. Fireball collision. Okay, so we're hitting things. The punching bag gets spawned probably somewhere in here in main. I definitely absolutely have left too much stuff in this main file at this point. Punching bag collider, damageable. So this can get hit, which is why it's getting hit above. I guess we don't have health yet. So maybe we do something like this. I don't know what to call this. Pub mod. Enemies? No, enemies. Attributes? I don't know what to call this. If I'm going to do health, and then maybe things like status effects and whatnot, and I want to put those in the same directory, what do I call that? Just call it punching bag for now. So punching bag then has health, right? I don't know how I'm going to deal with health yet. I'm going to derive component on it. We'll derive debug on it. We're going to use the Bevy prelude in here. Probably at some point have some kind of health bar for these things. Maybe I should have named this health instead of punching bag. That would have made more sense. So health is what? Probably like an F32, right? Probably want to keep around total and current. I probably in the future want something like armor, but armor is probably a separate component. Even total and current can probably be different components, honestly. Like total health and current health. We'll impl health, we'll add to fn new, and we will return a self. And we'll do health. This will accept total, which will be an F32. This will be pub. I guess total will be pub. Some documentation. So health is the health of an entity. I know that's really shitty documentation. New health component using a total health count. Later, Ryan, have fun. Is it worth learning a cloud provider like GCP or AWS? Oh, you asked about Leptos earlier, didn't you? And I never answered that question. It depends on what you want to do. I think knowing how to work with AWS is a significant skill, but it also takes a lot of work. And you have to be very specific about what you actually want out of it, because you could spend an entire career just learning AWS stuff. So if you like want to learn how to deploy certain things or want to learn how to work with, you know, I don't know, databases on AWS or something, like have a goal in mind. Don't just like learn AWS, if that makes sense. But AWS is a useful skill for sure. Being able to deploy things, being able to set up your own infrastructure, being able to do all of that stuff, you know, working with serverless, maybe a little bit more of a niche skill than setting up servers or whatever, but you know, knowing how to work with bastions for VPCs and whatnot. Didn't Google create Kubernetes and open source it? Yes, absolutely. Okay, health components. Kubernetes is not necessarily what I would suggest you start with, if that's your question. Kubernetes is a thing, but you probably don't want to run it yourself unless you want to be a Kubernetes expert. Like that's what you're going for if you're going to learn Kubernetes. You probably want to use something a little bit more like Elastic Beanstalk or any of these other things. I don't think I don't think that most people should be, spending a ton of time learning Kubernetes. It doesn't really benefit you all that much unless you are intending to be a Kubernetes expert. Okay, so we've got health. We've got this other system over here somewhere. Damageable. I guess this is going to have... Oh, right. I forgot I did this thing. The health needs to be on the parent. But the collider is going to be on the child. You're planning to create the next Facebook? Good luck. That is... I'll see you in 10 years and see how you did. See, facing rigid bodies, material mesh 2D, health, collider, damageable. I feel like I want to abstract the relationships here. I feel like having individual colliders. So right now, basically what I'm doing is I'm setting colliders that are children of the entities so that we can put the collider on the right spot on the floor rather than having it be at the center of the sprite. And that's fine. But dealing with things like this, where damageable is a component that you can hit with a fireball, right? We're going to fire an event. And I don't necessarily want to know how deep in the chain this collider is. So it would be nice to have some kind of concept of like bubbling that up to the parent entity. I guess that's what observers are, right? Actually, do I have access to observers? Should we use observers? Heighten with collider, shader, and blender with lights. I don't know what that means. It's usually, from my understanding, it's usually not worth doing collision on the GPU. Where was I? Lost my train of thought. Oh, right, observers. Observers, I think, went out in RC3. Do I risk just updating so that we can start playing with them? Let's take a look at observers first. Where do I want to look at this? There is an observers example. Content website. So hooks and observers. Hooks are lower level than observers. Hooks are kind of like making guarantees about things when you insert stuff. So like if you were a physics library and you needed something specific that would be inserted whenever some component was added so that the physics steps could run correctly, a hook would be able to ensure that because it runs immediately, is my understanding. And then observers are kind of like a higher level version of that is more meant for application developers. So hooks more for library style functionality, observers more for application level functionality. I think you can use them both to do very similar things. On top of that, there's also events, which haven't quite coalesced into being the same or different than observers quite yet. I think there's going to be more changes in 0.15 around that. But observers originally inspired by Flex, C++, or I don't know if it's C++, CM++, ECS system. that has pioneered quite a few features. Yeah. Hooks are constructors and destructors. Observers are more like callbacks. That's kind of what I was just saying. Black and white texture for height mathematics. I mean, I'm not really sure what you're getting at. I'm not gonna create a new kind of texture for doing collision. We have a collision library. I don't need to rewrite a collision library. That sounds awful. One hook per component, which is why it's library level, or one of the reasons it's library level. You can, I didn't quite get the last few changes that came in for observers, but you can kind of have global observers and per entity observers. When you're targeting a specific entity, I guess for our observer right now, we can target a specific entity, but we'll probably do something on all entities with some component later. These are kind of like system-like arguments, as we'll see in a second. When combined with commands that emit triggers, or when you're taking advantage of observers' ability to emit triggers which are then immediately processed. I think that's the other thing. I think events are exceedingly parallelizable. So like if you wanted things to just happen and then have another system that gathered up everything that's happened through a frame from a bunch of different systems and then processed them all in parallel, I think that's more of a systems and events situation. And then my understanding of observers is that they will run in this kind of like recursive way immediately. So you theoretically, if you had a really heavy observer, could block some other work in some way. I think. At which point you might want to move that out to a system or something. So commands that spawn, and .observe is the new thing. .observe is the per entity version in this case. So we're commands.spawning, make this a little bigger so people can see it. Commands.spawning, a couple of components, player, life, which is what we are doing right now, so health. And then .observe with a system and .observe with a system. This is using commands trigger targets to deal some damage to some player. So this is what we would do in our fireball collision event. We would trigger damage for some entity. And then these systems are the things that run as kind of like callbacks. So you have to do trigger first. If you're going to do a trigger, we've got this deal damage event, which I think they also have in this example. Yeah, which is just an event, regular event. And then it's querying for entities with a defense component. It's not querying for the life. And then this is very system oriented. So like if you need any additional data, you can just put it in a query or a resource or whatever. Commands trigger targets trigger.entity. So how is that triggering then? Life lost. Oh, do they already have bubbling? Is this doing the deal damage? I don't know that I fully understand this example. Respond to damage taken is the observer callback that triggers when there's a deal damage event for this entity. It gets the defense component, which is not the health component. The defense. So we're getting the defense data from the query using query.get. Remember, queries are kind of like databases at this time. So you can just kind of query for all defense components and then check it later. Damage is trigger.event.damage. So that's how much damage is coming in from this event. Life lost is damage saturating subtraction. So we always land at 0 if we go below. Defense. And then it triggers trigger targets. What is trigger targets? What does trigger targets would do with just an entity is my question. Let's see, 0.14 RC3, trigger targets commands. Sends a trigger for given targets. So this must be implicitly one of two things that's happening here. Either this is implicitly sending I was in the browser window. That's what I was doing. This is either implicitly sending the deal damage trigger, but we're not listening to the deal damage trigger. It's not doing anything with life lost either. I feel like this is a little bit... I wonder if they've updated this example since the draft. I don't know how often this page gets rendered. Let's look at respond to losing life. Trigger targets and trigger. So trigger target sends a trigger for the given targets. This will run any observer of the event that watches those targets. Any observer of the event that watches those targets. But they are sending an event in, so that's got to be trigger targets in this example has to be a bug. I think this example just didn't get updated. Because you got self, event, and targets, right? And we are on commands trigger targets, which is commands here, trigger targets. So I think that in your Bevy app, you have events that are lost, but only when the events come from eGUI and only when the mouse does not move for 5 seconds before the click. Ooh, that's interesting. Are you running the are you running like the power down settings for the Bevy app? There's like power saving settings and whatnot that are more meant for CAD applications and what. Yeah, I feel like the example in the draft right now is potentially wrong. Let's see what they have in the examples in the repo. Where would the observer's example be? Scene, reflection, math, games, app, ECS. Where's observers? There's observers. Okay, so this is an example. 200 lines, so it's pretty big. Let's run this locally so that we can see what it does. Oh yeah, it might be when it's settings desktop app at this point. I don't remember exactly what it is anymore. I don't use it that often. You're probably on 0.13, right? So no, it's not the render settings. It's this is what you said you're using. Yes. This is what I was talking about. This is what you were I didn't realize that that's a resource now. That's nice. So it's reactive or reactive low power. It is this. It's update mode. So I don't know which one you're actually ending up using, but I do believe that this will be affecting like internal app event listening. Yeah, unlike reactive, this mode will ignore events that don't come from interacting with a window. There you go. If you are on reactive low power and you're missing events, this is why. And it specifically calls out mouse motion. So that is almost exactly what you said you were running into. And this is what you said you were using. So that's it. It's intended behavior, it looks like. Or if not intended behavior, then just how it has to work. So if you wanted that, then I don't know. I might try to have a little bit more control over which of these is happening. But yeah. Yeah, happy to connect dots anytime. Let's see. Cargo run example. What was the example? Observers. Do I need to pull? Oh, I'm in the wrong. I'm not in my. Okay. Main. Pull. We'll just run the main example. Example observers. How good at Rust does somebody need to be to feel comfortable using Bevy? I think you can be as new as brand new. I think that Bevy probably, I think the most confusing thing if you don't know Rust and you haven't worked with a type system is going to be just types in general. Other than that, if you've written another language, I think that Bevy is actually probably a really good place to start writing Rust. Somewhat ironically. But like in Bevy, you have these systems, right, that handle isolated things and whatnot. And it gives you kind of like a way to handle global data. So that's things like resources and whatnot. And it gives you ways to interact with things in systems and events and et cetera, et cetera. And you end up running into far fewer lifetime issues. On the other hand, there are some interesting, like, you can run into kind of wild system type errors for query types and things like that if you write things in the wrong way, which is like a very beginner thing to do. But I do think that Bevy is actually really, really, really good for new Rust developers. It takes away a lot of the what it takes away is actually the architecture of your application, which is something that people really struggle with, especially if you're used to writing something that's a lot looser, like something that doesn't have a type system, something where you can just kind of grab anything at any time. Bevy gives you a structure in which to write your Rust application inside of apps and plugins and systems, and like it does a lot of that complicated architectural stuff that a beginner, if they had to write it from scratch, would have harder trouble with, if that makes sense. You're saying it abstracts functions for a game. I think what it does is it separates the functionality that you need to write. So like I mean, theoretically, you could write a CLI app with Bevy, right? But um, the thing I'm kind of getting at is that the way you write a Bevy app. So if I look at like my main over here or something, right? The main is the messiest file in this entire project. Just for context on why we're looking at it in the first place. Ton of imports at the top. There's this app stuff, whatever. I'm adding a bunch of systems, adding a bunch of plugins. And then all of the functionality is very isolated. So like when I'm doing screenshot work, right? This take screenshot function, it only asks for what it needs. It gets what it needs. It's very clear as to whether it's mutable or not. To make it mutable or not mutable, you usually just add mute somewhere. So that's pretty good for beginners. Like they can kind of just like spam stuff, if that makes sense. Like, oh, this needs to be mutable. I'll add mute and see if that fixes it. And it probably will in a Bevy system. And then you get to do an isolated like segment of work. Whereas in just like a regular Rust application that didn't have a framework or didn't have anything and you were just building something from scratch, you might put this logic just like sitting in the middle of your application, right? And it might interact with a whole bunch of other stuff just because of where you put it. And I think Bevy saves you from a lot of that accidental complexity. And I think that that's one of the reasons that it makes using Bevy when you don't really know Rust yet easier than, say, building your own application from scratch. That's kind of what I'm getting at. Like Bevy kind of holds your hand through Rust a little bit. And you don't have to deal with as many lifetime issues. You don't have to worry about how long your data is living because Bevy has already defined how long your data lives, right? That's the wrong way to phrase that, but click on a mine to trigger it. It triggers all overlapping mines. So this is observers. Click on one of these circles. Any circle that is overlapping with it gets triggered. Any circle that is not overlapping with it does not get triggered. So it's got that recursive effect. And this is that example. Spatial index. That is... Okay, that's custom. Okay. They're using a spatial index, so nothing super fancy about observers with how things are getting triggered here. We're just going to treat this as a database. We're not really going to even look into it. So here's the handle click. This is when the observer will get fired, right? Or triggered. This is where we'll send our event. This logic doesn't really matter because it's kind of just doing picking stuff. So if your button was just clicked on something that is a valid mine, then trigger explode mines, which is an event with a position and a radius. And then this is also triggering explode mines inside of explode mine. So yes, the example in the release notes right now is non-functional, I think. Unless there's a second definition of trigger targets, which I don't think is possible. Let me write that down, actually. Because that's really awkward to have in the release notes, and I could just make a PR for it. Explode mine. So we trigger on explode. I guess... that's not the one we're looking for yet, though, right? Because we've got explode mines and explode. So let's take a look at explode mines, wherever that handler is happening. Interesting. Commands. Okay, so every mine is observing with explode mine. which listens to the explode event. Where's explode mines being handled? Oh, there we go. There's the observe. So it's an inline system. That's why I was confused. So this is a app observe, which means it's global and firing for all entities, I believe. So when explode mines is triggered, we grab the spatial index and all of the mines, grab the event, use the index to get the nearby, and then trigger explode for all of them. And then on add and on remove. Okay, so on add and on remove are used to add it and remove it from that spatial index, which is very cool. So anytime you add a mine, you don't need to remember to also add it to the spatial index, because that'll just happen in on add, which is a trigger on add with a mine. Because this is global. So is mine a filter? Let's go for trigger. So trigger, E and B, entity probably, and bundle? Bundle. Interesting. Why would it be bundle? Type containing the triggered event information for a given run of the observer. This contains the event data itself. And if it was triggered for a specific entity, it includes that as well. So this is the event probably. And then B has to implement bundle, which is interesting. It's interesting that that's not component. Mine in this case is just a component. So on add must be reading the trigger for on add. We're looking for the on add event, and then this is the thing that needs to implement bundle. I wonder if you can do that on bundles. That feels really strange. But I guess in the end, tuples are bundles. So if you wanted to specify multiple components here, it would have to be a bundle-like thing. So it's weird to think about it as a bundle, but it's really just a list of the components. Okay. So on add for any entity that has a mine on it. Am I reading that correctly? So we query for the mines and we add them to the index. We don't care about the logic. And then on remove for any entity that has a mine on it, remove it from the index. And then explode mine is per entity. This is really interesting because it's bouncing back and forth between two observers, it looks like. Or it's not bouncing back and forth between two observers. Well, yes, it is, actually. So when the explode mines event is fired, explode mines has a position and a radius. So not an entity. So it says draw a circle in some spot, which is being handled here now, and trigger explode for anything inside of this circle. Explode then triggers, right? triggering this observer. Each of these entities, because this is an observer on entities, then gets despawned and triggers a new mine in some radius. In this case, it's the radius of the circle, so if they're exactly overlapping. Which then goes back up to explode mines, which then uses that circle to say everything inside of this needs to explode, which then potentially explodes and potentially sends more events. Okay. I feel like that's going to take a little bit of explaining to people. I get it. It's really interesting. So how would we do that for health? Should we do it for health? All open questions. I think observers went out in RC3 though. So I do think that we need to update. RG Bevy. Cargo.lock. Oh, that's the wrong thing. Do people understand observers from the way that I just went over it, or should I like re-go over it again? I know it wasn't really that much of an explanation, but well, that's doing a weird clear. Interesting. Wonder if that's the liege. I thought I could get the version from this by doing that RG, but I guess not. What do I think of NeoVim? NeoVim's fine. I don't have any problems with NeoVim. I don't particularly use it myself, but I think if you're looking into Vim, you should probably use NeoVim instead. But other than that, it's just like, you know, another editor. I think that it's interesting, like the Emacs and NeoVims of the world require a lot more investment, but potentially live longer. So, yeah, and obviously, like Xavier is saying, people love NeoVim. People love Emacs. People love like these deeper tools. I'm more of an Emacs user myself. That isn't to say that Vim is bad or anything. People really like NeoVim. Okay, so if we used observers for this, can I just do a cargo update? Oh, that's the wrong fucking... See, did we get... Yeah, we got RC... We got RC4. We were already on RC3, actually. That's actually cool. I like that. See if this runs. Patch wasn't used in the crate graph. I guess RC4 is really what we want here. Bevy, Bevy, Bevy. Bevy. RC4. RC4. Is this the right thing? Yeah. Oh, this is the wrong. Oh, that's right. Okay. Bevy. Bevy. That's not the cargo toml I wanted to change, but it's the one I touched. Let's see. Dot 4. I think that this should just work for everything. I haven't really been paying attention to see if people have done the releases for 3 and 4, but oh, you know what my problem is going to be though? I have a branch. And this branch is in vendor Bevy, right? And this is the gizmos work, so I'll add that, git add you, git commit, depth for gizmos. And then I think I am on the release branch, but I don't remember exactly. Yes, I believe that I will be able to just rebase this. Git pull rebase upstream release 0.14.0 I think is the right incantation. I don't think this should have any issues. Okay, so that's our upgrade there for the release version, because we're not actually using the version on crates.io. I actually have it vendored right now. So just paying attention to make sure that that is going to use our vendor. Bit slower to get started, but much quicker afterwards. Learning curve stuff. Yeah, NeoVim, Emacs, those kind of editors are editors you invest a lot in, but editors that will serve you for a very long time. I think it's interesting to see how long VS Code has lived, but like the Vim and Emacs worlds have lived for many, many, many times longer. Never texted Helix. There's nothing left in the milestone. Yeah, Spuds. The release is coming. I'm not, I don't know the release date, just to be clear. But if I had to guess, it would be like Sunday or Monday. I don't know that that's true. They might kick it back another week. There may be, I think a lot of the migration guides still need to be updated, so that may be a reason that it gets kicked back one more week. But yes, basically the milestone is over. Am I gonna get copyright claimed because somebody walked by playing No Scrubs on a boombox? Yeah, Helix is cool. I haven't tried it recently. I tried it a long time ago when it was less full featured. Basically just triggered a recompilation of everything. So you use Helix, but you don't need much from your editors other than LSP and custom commands. That's cool. I've gotten back into writing my video scripts in Emacs. I was an Emacs user for a number of years, and that went just fine for me, honestly. But when I started doing more videos and streaming, I switched to using VS Code most of the time because I feel like if I do things in VS Code, anybody that uses, you know, a NeoVim, a Helix, an Emacs, or whatever will understand what I'm doing. But also the people who don't know those things and aren't as experienced will also understand what I'm doing. I found that when I was using Emacs, I did a lot of things that were power user things. A lot of things that were like hit a couple of key combos and a bunch of things happened. And people would kind of be like, oh, I don't know what just happened. What did you just do? And things would change in files that weren't open, or, you know, buffers that were backgrounded and stuff like that, which was all fine. It works really well if you are like just being a professional programmer. It doesn't work as well if you are streaming or making videos. Is it good to know a terminal-based editor? I would say if it's something that interests you, then yes. If it's not something that interests you, then don't worry about it. Option unwrap on none in Bevy state. Source app 74. Where's Bevy? Bevy, source, nope, not source. Crates, state. Well, let me scroll up first to make sure that we didn't get. I don't, from the module count, it didn't seem like we were getting bad versions of Bevy. I think we're all RC4 at this point. So I think we're good there. But let's go Bevy state, source, and then app.rs, online 74. 74 is the state transition schedule. I know that there was something about this needing to be added in some way. And it wasn't being added. So let's take a look at the repo. There's probably going to be a state transition issue or PR that's been merged fairly recently. That's 20 days ago. Not quite what I want. I don't need when they were open, though. I need when they were closed. I feel like the state schedule wasn't getting added. May, easier mutation of schedules, on enter. Maybe I should check the milestone. This is from 3 weeks ago. Not the thing I'm looking for. This is state-related stuff. Yeah. App new doesn't set up the main schedule, so state transition isn't added in. Yeah, it's added through states plugin. Absolutely. I know it's not in the minimal plugins. It's interesting that that's not Warn if no states plugin installed. States right out of the app, but states plugin is not installed. That's what I was thinking this was going to be. This is in source app 60. So this would be the thing that ran, which would be this, which doesn't warn, it looks like. That's not the warning we're seeing. So if self world contains resource, init resource, init resource. So these are the current state and the next state for whatever state type you've inserted. You're adding an event called state transition event, and then tries to get the state transition schedule, which is set up inside of the states plugin somewhere. This doesn't need to be added at a different time now, does it? Warn, warn, warn. I would have expected to see this warning and not the error. Let's see, focus on the code, no GUI to distract you. Yeah, also, if you see my VS Code instance, it is like I've ripped everything out of the VS Code instance. Like a regular VS Code instance is far more noisy. It's got bottom bars and side bars and top bars and whatever. I just use it so my laptop fan doesn't shout at me. Fair. Also, it makes you use keyboard shortcuts and never the mouse. Yeah, I mean, they have mouse support these days too, so it's less of an issue than it used to be. Like, I know my current Emacs install will let me click on pretty much anything. Just like, you know, Zalige, for example, I can click on these tabs, which is wild. I will say, if you're looking for ergonomics, you probably want to be using like a NeoVim or an Emacs or something with a custom set of key bindings. Okay, we're unwrapping. We need to add the state transition schedule, I think. I didn't disable that. It says this is fixed. 2 weeks ago would be in RC3 probably. Hello, Armando. How are you doing today? We're just debugging a schedule issue in the Bevy release candidate, or rather, a schedule issue in my app that is using custom forks of Bevy and other crates. Okay, so this is doing that. There is... I feel a little bit weird about the escape codes that are coming out of Zalige right now. So I'm gonna do this in a different window. Bevy state app 74. That's exactly the same thing. No additional warnings. These are all compile warnings, so no issue there. Okay, we don't get any additional information. Init state, insert states. How do I make sure that this gets included? states plugin. Where is the states plugin inserted? I really thought the states plugin was part of the default plugins, but maybe it's not. Default plugins, states plugin with feature Bevy state. Is Bevy state not on by default? That would be really weird. States plugin registers the state transition schedule that we need. So if I look at my main.rs, probably not main, right? Yeah. Okay. Default plugins here. Resource there. Yada yada. Bunch of stuff. Loading state systems. In-game. I wonder if I have to update my Bevy asset loader or something. Let's see what we've got for Bevy asset loader at the moment. This is probably not published. Prepare for patch release. We're looking for Bevy main, probably. Bumped to RC3, so we do need to update this. And this depends on Bevy state. So my guess is it's actually in Bevy asset loader. Isn't there a new Bevy state feature? Yes, there is. Absolutely. I think that this is a how do I phrase this? The issue that we are seeing is delayed and not the actual issue that's causing it. So we're getting to an unwrap, but I think the error is happening way before that. (021) RC.1. The thing that I'm looking for here is we need a specific IS progress, which is this. That's fine. Can I just grab the commit here? Oh, that's my cargo lock. Why did I open cargo lock? Cargo toml, and then asset loader is somewhere in here. Here's asset loader. That's the same revision we have. So it must not be asset loader. That's the issue. Let's see, inspector eGUI, common assets. I don't think anything really changed. The default features are all on, so like, I don't think adding Bevy state here is really supposed to do anything. Yeah. I don't think the backtrace gets us anything either. Standard ops function, some details are omitted. Init state. Says main 64. Do I need to put this after default plugins now? That would be really awkward. Yeah. At least for some of it. Interesting. Okay, and then we're panicking on more app state stuff. This is in the start menu logic. I want to be here. I want to be in the expect. This is panicking on button bundle, button behavior, background color has duplicate components, background color. Ah, that's another thing that happened. I think they might have added something to the button bundle or messed with the background color. This is from last week, so this would have made it into the RC4. Make default behavior more intuitive. So where's the bundle? Button bundle is probably modified in here. Yeah, there was. Adding background color back to image bundle and button bundle. I didn't think that that was a terrible upgrade, honestly. But now we're going to have to go back and change everything. Background color. My guess is that this happens anywhere I have a background color, because I've already done this modification. I think my tolerance for changes is higher than other people's, is all it is. Where's my... Thought I had more background colors. Guess not. All right, let's start with that. It'll probably fail again because I think I've done this in a couple other places. 978. Button bundle, background color, comma in the wrong spot. The perils of using the main branch in the RC and the RC and the RC and the RC, especially when you have... Okay, so we're good. We're good. Everything's working. We're up to RC4. Those were some of the probably, I would assume that would be hard for other people to fix. Kind of issues, you know, like... Look at that. That's so nice. You can now just be inside of the archway. There's no colliders, so I'm inside of the block as well. but the fact that you can be behind this arch and that's one image makes me so happy. That's exactly what I was trying to do. Okay, so let's get this locked in here. RC4 update. All right, now what was I doing? Observers. We side quested to be able to use observers. Fireball collision. Let's see. So we're querying damageable things. We could put an observer for damage. Like damage events. And then trigger damage events here. So then would we want a global observer for handling damage? I think so. Let's try to figure this out. So let's go back to our health thing over here now that we can get rid of all of this extra stuff. And then we'll have, I don't know, are we going to do a health plugin here? Makes the most sense, I think. All of my naming is, of course, not the best naming. Health plugin, implement, app dot observe, right? Yeah, app dot observe, and then we will do observe damage. No, observe. I don't know. I'm going to call it observe damage for now. I don't know what it's going to do yet. This is going to be trigger what? We want trigger take damage on, let's just call this punching bag, I guess, for the moment. That's what we called it here, right, when we spawned it? I did not, however, put a component called punching bag on it. I think we also don't have health on this yet. So damageable. We need a health on probably the parent. It needs to take a value, so a total health. So we're just going to make it 10. There is no, it's completely arbitrary right now. I don't know, we'll make the damage it takes 1 or something. So we'll need an event. Because we're going to trigger that here, right? So this is going to be like commands.trigger take damage. And then we pass in the entity that we're trying to attack. Is that going to work? I'm obviously not full up on my observers yet. So we can trigger an event for an entity. So we probably want to trigger this for the parent with damageable entity parent, right? I think parent is special. I always forget. So we're going to do entity environmentals. Oh no, that's not actually what we want. We don't want this. We want it up here. We want query entity, colliding entities with fireball. This gives us all the fireballs. This is the damageables. Damageable, we want the parent. So damageables, if query contains entity, do damage. I guess this should be an if let, but I'm going to do a let. Query damageables dot get, and this will be an if let equals this, and this will be what, sum of a tuple that is entity or damageable entity. Damageable is probably just a filter because it doesn't have any data, and then parent. And then this is probably parent.0, right? I don't remember what's in parent. And then take damage is going to be some kind of event, right? So struct take damage, derive event. This will just be whatever, doesn't matter. We do have to bring this into scope. I have unfortunately broken Rust Analyzer due to my incomplete code. So observe damage is going to fire when the take damage event is fired for anything that has a health component. Does that sound right? That sounds right, I think. So here we'll debug trigger dot what? What do we have here? Trigger dot event. Trigger dot event isn't going to have anything, but that's fine. I don't think we have debug on here. Okay, so we've got take damage. This needs to be pub because we're going to need to import it from the other place so that we can actually use it. Take damage. Parent clearly needs to be something else. Query damageables.get. What is wrong with that? Parent needs to be shared reference. If let, is this okay then? Yeah, I guess it's not an option, it's a result. And then parent, I think, needs to be dereferenced, but I'm not sure yet. And then this is trigger targets. And then parent is what? The trait trigger targets is not implemented for parent. Let me remember what parent is, because I do not remember apparently. Parent.get. So we want the entity ID for that parent. That should give it the punching bag health component. The more that I build out these things, the more I feel like I should be making separate crates for a lot of this functionality, because it is actually so, like, it's so event driven and so happening over APIs like that, that it makes a lot of sense to separate them, which I love. Okay, so what are the chances that I can aim in the game that I've created? So do damage there. So do damage. So we are technically triggering. There's nothing listening to it yet because we don't have the health plugin yet. This needs to be pub. And then in our massive list of plugins, I guess I'll start another tuple. Punching bag, health, plugin. Okay, I think technically that should do it if I've determined observer functionality correctly. And if I can hit things in the game where I've coded it. Okay. So do damage and then trigger targets take damage. Parent.get. This parent should be the parent with the health on it. This should be triggering as far as I'm aware. And it is not. So app.observe, right? Observe damage. That is the same thing that we saw in the mines example, right? App.observe, trigger. Oh, that's trigger explode mines, actually. So maybe not app.observe. So this is triggering explode mines. Explode mines doesn't have any entity data. It is just a regular, hey, this is supposed to happen at some location, which then triggers explode for it to actually happen. So take damage. What if we don't have health here? Does it trigger? I feel like this is supposed to trigger for specific entities. Okay, so it does trigger. Trigger targets, take damage, parent get. So this parent, right, is the damageable entity. The damageable entity is this. And I've put health on the parent. So take damage. I feel like should be firing. But maybe I need to observe in a different way. Okay, so there's on add, trigger. I think I need to observe like this. This is the other thing that was confusing to me about observers. The way that you kind of need to like spawn everything in and then have observer watch entity if you're doing entity local stuff. Because instead of what we're doing right now, we could do this. And this is explode mine. Explode mine only takes explode. I thought these took entities for some reason. Yeah, okay. On add mine. So that's only on the app world on add. Runs when a mine component is added to an entity. Oh. That is not intuitive. I mean, it makes sense now, I guess. So when the on-add event fires for a mine component, this trigger will run for some entity. Okay. So in that case, we could attach a component and listen to it, but I don't really want to do that. I don't think I want to attach a component to do damage. I think I want to just listen to the observer. Which means that we need to do a more generic version like this. And trigger.entity will give it to us. And this will be query.health probably. So instead of having, not mine, but health. So do this, where we have a trigger and we have a query, and we can debug the trigger event and query.get, let's see, for, I don't know, health in query. No, that's not what I want to do. For query.get trigger.entity is what I want. Sorry, you're watching me learn observers for the first time. So if anybody has observers questions, now's probably a good time. Query to get trigger entity, so let, and then debug health. And then remove health is basically what we're going to be doing here, but health doesn't have debug on it. Oh, because it's a result. I'm going to unwrap that for the moment because it should always work. Okay, so that works. So the way that we ended up doing this then is we have a global observer that is intended to observe damage, right? And then we've got a damageable component on our punching bag, child, and we've got a health component on the parent. This is just like something arbitrary that I've decided to do. It is not necessarily related to observers. The thing that is related to observers is once we've determined that a fireball has hit something that it can do damage to, we then trigger take damage for that entity, which triggers this observer, which allows us to get the entity over in this observer, which we can then use to get the health component for the entity that got hit. And once it got hit, then we could, you know, mute health this, mute query. This could be get mute. And this could be, let's debug. Let's see, health minus equals 1, let's say. So you get 10 hits. What is the issue there? Huh. I feel like that always trips me up. Oh, because I have current. That's why. I forgot this wasn't just a number. Now we should be able to do the binary operation. So current -1, we debug health. Okay, so we do this. So 10, we go down to 9, go down to 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so we've got observer-based damage for damageable entities now. Do you have to work with Rust lifetimes in Bevy? Not often. Not unless you're doing something special. You'll see that. So the one thing that I will say is that lifetimes always exist. Anytime you have a reference, a shared reference, you have a lifetime. But for the most part, you don't have to worry about those inside of Bevy. You can run into things that are very similar, where if you are trying to query for all entities with mutable components or whatever that are overlapping, you might run into an issue there. And by issue, I just mean you'll see an error message and it'll tell you to do something, not that it won't work. But for the most part, you don't have to really think about lifetimes. That's kind of what I was getting at earlier, where you can write these kind of like small systems. You get the resources that they need, you operate with them, and then they're kind of done. In that sense, Bevy is kind of doing a lot of the management of the lifetime of this data for you, because it's storing things in the way that it stores things, depending on what you're looking at. So like all of that data just exists guaranteed for the lifetime of the system that you're running. Mute references. Yeah, I usually term those exclusive references, but yeah, the end mutes here. Like you need to deal with references, you need to use references, but you don't need to think that much about lifetimes when using Bevy. Okay, so we've got damage and it's working. Obviously, this capsule is not reacting to having negative health. So I wonder when it's right to do events and when it's right to do observers, which are technically also events. Observers, I believe, will run immediately. So when you take damage, you probably want that to just apply immediately. Or when you give damage to enemies, you probably want that to just apply immediately. Because that could be the difference between, you know, succeeding at a level and getting hit. It's very interesting, though, in general. So, things can take damage now. They're taking 1 damage. I probably don't want it to go below 0. But I probably also don't know that this particular system needs to care. So maybe we work on a health bar now. Display this. For a health bar, what do we want to do? Probably when something has a health component, we also insert a health bar. But we probably don't want one on the player. So could we do an exploration into hooks? let's see. That's observers. This is hooks. Register component hooks gives us hooks. Hooks on remove so it's interesting because hooks will run immediately, and we could also write this logic using observers. So when we add a health component, there is also a child added that is a health bar. That health bar probably needs to be slightly different per enemy. We'll see. I want to do this with component hooks because I haven't used component hooks yet. So let's do this, I guess. Impl component for targetable. I don't actually know what we need to do. Actually, I also don't know that we need this to be a hook, just to be clear. So implement component for health, right? We'll get rid of the derive. And then we'll bring in storage type and component hooks and targetable. Is targetable their thing? Targetable is their thing. We want health. And then that's different. So let's do this instead. Let's comment that out and we'll go hooks dot what? On add. And then this is mute world, targeted entity, and component ID. We're never going to need the component ID. At least I don't think we're going to need the component ID. So on add, if we debug this and we say, well, let's not debug, let's info. Start using our actual Bevy logging. On add health. Targeted entity. So, because these components get added when you spawn, so this on add will fire when you spawn in this punching bag, then it should have just fired. Loading state, on add health. There we go. That's sick. So we're adding health to entity 30. Entity 30 is going to be the punching bag, right? Yeah, entity 30 is the punching bag. Sick. So now what we can do is what? Spawn in a rectangle. Let's see. For Bevy, we've got those new primitives, right? So do I want a sprite or do I want a mesh 2D? That is the question. 2D shapes. A mesh 2D would allow us to modify the material and present the health via a shader. That's probably what I want to do. So let's go grab the shader example for 2D, shader material 2D. We are going to need to do this again. We've done this before on stream. Basically, we're gonna spawn in a material mesh 2D bundle, right, with some rectangle in it. That rectangle, this isn't gonna be command spawn. What is this? World get unwrap targeting 0 none. World get health targeted by. I think it's going to be world.get health will get the health, targeted entity, targetable. I think I want the entity with health on it. How do I get the entity with health on it? I guess that's this entity, right? So world dot entity targeted entity. Do I need this to be mute? Entity mute? Well, let's comment this out for a second. And then dot. This is probably going to be unwrap, and this is going to be spawn. This is already an entity. I need the entity commands. Hey, Mike20. Yeah, glad you've been enjoying it. I do take requests. I don't always do them, but you're happy to ask for whatever you'd like to see, and sometimes I won't put it on my list, and sometimes I will. But I do not mind you asking, as long as I don't mind people asking, as long as when I have to say no, that people don't get upset, because I can't do everything. Okay, so world entity mute. Is entity mute really what I want? I don't know that that's true. Let's go for world entity mute. Achieves an entity world mute, read and write operations, world new, world spawn, world entity get mute. Archetype contains entry insert. That's what I want. And I want this. It says it gives me entity world mute. An entity world mute has insert. An insert takes a bundle. I don't know why insert is upset, but we also need meshes. And then we also need materials if we're going to do it like this. These don't exist yet, so we're not too worried about it. Let's see. You just refactored to the 014 release candidate, and you were some of my motivation for refactoring early. Nice. Did it go well for you at least? This is the first release candidate cycle, so I think it'll be smoother as more release candidate cycles happen, but I'm very happy with the way that the current release candidate cycle improved the process. Yeah, exactly what Steve is saying for the earlier stuff around like access. I really feel like Bevy is fine for new Rust programmers because of that. Spend 80% of the time refactoring sRGBA. Yeah, that's fair. The color stuff was fairly quick in terms of like actually performing a single change, but if you have that littered through your entire app, then that's a huge change for you. Hello, how are you? Welcome. Okay, color texture. We're not going to have a texture here. We're just going to have a color. This is going to be red, probably. This is going to be a health material, which we haven't created yet. We need materials and meshes, and then we'll just call this mesh and that material. Mesh equals this. So we've got basically handles here. And then this is not going to be 128 when we're done with it. And it's actually not even going to be anything close to that. So let's do like, let's start off with 100 by like 10 or something. And then we need to create this health material. I think that I don't have that on my clipboard anymore, so I'll go grab that again. So let me get rid of this. Let me do this, custom material, call this health material. I guess we should call this health bar material, right? As bind group needs to get brought into scope. Health bar material is what goes there. Material 2D, come into scope. Health bar material here. Shader ref needs to come into scope. I haven't looked to see if there's a render prelude, but I feel like there should be. I don't mind it because Rust Analyzer handles a lot of it for me. But okay, so this is going to be materials, health bar material. We haven't created that script yet either. So we're not done with the Rust yet. We do need meshes, right? So we need these two things from setup. So world dot get resource is the right function. Get resource mute, and then I think I need to turbo fish this to be res, or not res mute, but assets mesh. I think it gets the res mute by default. So meshes, and then meshes.add. This needs to be mute if we're going to mutate it. Actually, that wasn't the issue. What was the issue? Missing color texture. No method add found for option. Okay, so this meshes must exist. I don't have it in my brain to write that error message right now. Okay, so that's that. And then we need to do this again for the material. And we're going to use this type instead, but it's not going to be custom material. It's going to be health bar material. And then we're going to get rid of this texture because we're not going to have a texture. We could have a texture in the future. I'm just not going to do one for now. Entity equals this. We don't need to have that entity there. So what is the issue with inserting? Method not found in entity mute. We have a world here, right? We have a deferred world here. Okay. That is different. Is deferred world new? I don't know that I've seen deferred world before. A world reference that disallows structural ECS changes. This includes initializing resources, registering components, or spawning entities. Interesting. Okay, so observers can't insert? Is that true? Or hooks can't insert? That would be really weird, right? Because we're inside of hook add, mute world. We don't have access to anything else. So let's do component hooks on add. We get a deferred world. On add will always run before on insert. Spawning an entity counts as adding all of its components. Yeah. We'll panic if there's already an on add. Yep. Interesting. What are we supposed to do with the deferred world? World mutating functions. Hooks are functions that run when a component is added. Yeah. Update cached index. Clean up resources. So it says it's supposed to be used for cleaning up resources, which makes me feel like yeah, so world resource mute. And that's an on remove and on add. So we should be good. Method not found in entity mute. So let's go for deferred world, wherever that is. A world reference that disallows structural ECS changes. This is my primary stream. YouTube is my primary stream. I do not do Twitch. Primarily, I create videos. This is just kind of like a fun Saturday morning thing for me to do. Lately, I've been making sure that the This Week in Bevy videos get out every week. So that's taken a lot of my video creation. But I'm planning on getting back into doing more stuff, especially once 0.14 drops, which is going to be pretty soon. Okay, entity mute exposes read and write operations for the given entity. Right? Entity mute. Entity mute doesn't have insert. Can we not insert components? Interesting. I need to read up on deferred world then. Or maybe component hooks. I think component hooks were part of the observers change. So maybe we just go back and look at the draft. See if there's a call out for any issues. Okay, ECS hooks and observers. Processing events. Buffered events. Change detection and removed components. And then we have the new stuff, which is lifecycle hooks and observers. Lifecycle hooks is what we're currently trying to use. Only one hook per component. Low-level ECS invariants. Hierarchy correctness. I guess technically this doesn't need to be hierarchy. Hooks always run before observers and cannot be removed, so are more suitable for maintaining critical safety or correctness invariants. So like the structure of a tree of entities feels like that to me. Hooks are somewhat faster. They're reduced flexibility. So maybe this is the key. Maybe the fact that the hooks can't do everything is why we would need to use an observer here. This is the targetable example that we were just looking at earlier. So they don't insert anything here because mute world is actually... So we can't insert new things into the world? Is that what that's saying? Because adding and removing components can only be done in the context of exclusive world access, hooks are always run immediately, leaving no opportunity for desync. Okay, they keep talking about adding and removing components, but that's exactly what we're trying to do right now. The advantages, yada yada. Gameplay. Oh, this is, okay, deal damage, lose life. Right, this is the example that didn't have the right code here. Hierarchy management for ARI is also a thing that is planned to be worked on. So we could, if I felt like it was important enough, we could use ARI, which is a third-party crate for hierarchy management, for relations specifically. I don't see... The type says we can't do it, but I don't see anything around why you can't do it in the docs. Register component hooks. There are 3 component life cycles: add, insert, and remove. A hook has 3 arguments. Deferred world allows access to resource and component data as well as commands. Okay. I didn't... Does it actually have a commands thing on it? It does have commands. So targeted entity. Okay. So we just grab commands. That makes sense. I get it, because commands are deferred. So with a deferred world, you would have to use commands to insert something that is going to be handled after when it syncs up again. But it was not what I thought was going to happen. Okay, that's all good. We need this health bar material. Where is my materials folder? I guess I just called this shaders. This is going to be the same thing, so we'll just copy and paste it, and this will be material health bar. That WGSL. And this is using an SDF. I don't want to do that. I want to do the struct that we have, which I kind of threw away, didn't I? Okay, shaders. We name this material health bar to match with the other things. We have a color coming in. The color is going to be red. We are also going to want a uniform that is the health. I think that I can just make this an F32 because I'm not looking for WebGL support. I'm going to name this health percentage so it's a little bit more clear. And this will be an F32 value from 0 to 1. And that will control how much of our health bar is full. So this will start with 1. And then if I go back to my WGSL script, this color will come in. I actually want struct health, I guess, just material, right? And then we have color, which is a vec4, F32, and then we have health percentage, which is a F32, and this is going to be a material, and this is going to return just that color to start with. I'm just going to call this material. Okay, so running this, we should have a hook that inserts... Did I actually insert it? We should have a hook that inserts a rectangle. The rectangle should be too big. It should display the health. It is not hooked up to actually being updated yet. Okay, what do we have here? Main materials must exist. Oh, because I didn't register. Okay. So up here, we're going to do... I forget what the incantation is. But we are looking at the example here, so I'm going to grab this and copy it. Huzzah. .add plugins. Actually, that was part of the thing that I copied. Maybe it wasn't. .add plugins, this, but this is not custom material. We do need material 2D plugin and scope. And then we have health bar material. So that should set us up for success. Make this an F32 because I don't need WebGL2 support. Can you explain that? Or maybe you said WGSL. I said WebGL2, and what I meant was dealing with individual F32s on WebGL2 requires adding some padding in. It's not a big deal, really. Like it's just not super important. Usually Bevy takes care of that kind of stuff for you. But if you're lining up like a lot of F32s, you might want to be padding them So if I show you something inside of where's my vendor? There's my vendor. Source, render, shaders, common. So you see how we've got time here? So we've got a bunch of vec2s and then we've got time. And then we kind of had this padding for byte alignment. You may or may not run into that. My comment was kind of like offhanded. I don't even want to think about this, but I won't have to because I'm not doing web stuff. This is never going to be a web app, so I never need to worry about this. But that was the offhanded comment. Why don't I use a whole number instead of floats? Wouldn't that make less decimal reference counting? I'm not sure what you mean by that, but I will say that when writing WGSL, you're going to be dealing with floats. Everything's going to be floats for the most part. Especially because I open my shader again, especially because everything in shaders tends to be this like F32 0 to 1 value. And I don't know a good way to explain why that is other than you can basically punch a whole bunch of different kinds of data into the values 0 to 1. So people do all over the place for a bunch of different reasons, for color, for information, for depth, for all these sorts of other things. Oh, that just spawned it in randomly. What is this yellow? Interesting. Where is the capsule? I don't want the punching bag on the camera. I take the camera and I do orthographic projection and I hit this with a larger view and I make it maybe a little bit bigger. Well, we can see that the collider is significantly deformed. I feel like that means that I accidentally scaled this way up and that there's like a giant capsule somewhere up here. I guess not though. This is the way zoomed out. This is when you want to play like an ant. Okay, so what did I do here? What happened? Health new kinematic. I didn't change any of the transforms. I didn't change the mesh here. Punching bag collider. This is the collider. Damageable 15 and 7.5. There's no big situation there. I wonder what's happening there. Oh, because I'm scaling. Right. I wish we didn't use scale in the examples. I feel like scaling messes a whole bunch of stuff up unintuitively. Okay, so where's our rect then? Our rect is here. I don't want rect default. I want from size, I think. And we'll do a vec2 new, like a 110. And I think that'll fix it. I think it was the scaling in the transform. It's interesting that the capsule seems like it's gone. Oh, I'm inserting this on the targeted entity. I need to add a child. That's my bad. So I need world.commands.spawn for this. And then not insert. And this needs to be .id, so we get the entity back. Health bar equals that. And then this is going to be add child health bar. That makes so much more sense, honestly. It was because I was inserting the material mesh 2D on something that already had a material mesh 2D bundle. So it was overriding it using a hook, which is very cool. The idea that you could even do that. But yeah, there we go. So now we've got this. It doesn't have health action yet. So it's not reducing. I also probably want it z-indexed in front of this. But I'm not too worried about that yet. So transform default. Let's do transform from XYZ maybe. And we'll do what? Health bar at the top or bottom? Does float calculation add time complexity? I'm going to go with a pretty general answer that is no, because it's on the GPU. And the GPU is made for doing burr through a lot of floats. You're making a Bevy web game, and I think that makes the development way harder, especially for async HTTP code. Hope Bevy supports native async for sockets and such in the future. Yeah, I think there's a couple of crates for doing networking and stuff like that. You could also use like request blocking or whatever. But yeah, I hear you. Health bars should always be on top, you think? All right, we'll put it on top. Let's see, the height of this collider, or the height of the material here is 16. No, 32. So let's do 16. And we'll do 0, 16. I don't know. We'll throw it randomly like 10. See if that goes in front. And then what we want to do actually is keep this updated. So we need a system that updates health materials that are attached to children. So update health bar materials. We are going to need assets health bar materials is res mute assets health bar materials. And then we are also going to need a query for health. Not health. That's not the right thing to write. A query for health and children. I don't think I want to do children. Health and children. Does this need to be a shared reference? Yes. Okay, so we've got a query for health, query for children. That'll give us the entities that could have the health bar. I guess the other thing that could happen, because we are doing observed damage here, right, is we could do it here. I don't know what the trade-off is here, if I'm being honest. Observers are super new. They actually aren't even in a stable release yet. That'll come, you know, over the next week or so. So my question here is, I have this health component that's updating, right? And we're using observers to do the damage calculation, which means that the observers basically run immediately. But the visual for the health bar updating probably isn't as important as actually calculating the damage, right? If you say do a bunch of damage and then it takes a frame or two to like update the health bar, like that thing is still going to die, right? Like the boss is still going to end the level, whatever. So I don't think that the health bar update actually needs to happen in this observer. But I don't know what the trade-off really is. So I don't know if I actually want to do it in the observer or do it as a separate system. Well, what do we do here? Hide user from channel. That person will never ever send a message on this channel ever again. Like car health in GTA. I don't remember what car health in GTA is like. You mean like the top-down GTA? Let me not Google GTA in a Chrome window on stream. Let me do it on the side. I don't see any health bars. I don't remember there being health bars either. I'm glad you're enjoying the darkness. Okay, so I think that it's an open question as to whether to do the health material update in the observer or in a separate thing. I think semantically it doesn't matter if the health bar updates as much as the actual health calculation having happened. So we're going to leave the health calculation happening in the damage observer, but we are going to update the health bar visual in the material later, like whenever that can happen. Ooh. Starting to feel how much talking I'm doing. Update health bar material. Add systems. Update, whatever. And we could like run if in state whatever. I don't really care about this running or not running. But we'll say in game. What's wrong with run if? Oh, I put it in the wrong spot. There we go. So update health bar materials. We'll query for any health. I kind of only want to do this when the health bar changes. I think with changed health is the right way to do that. Let's go look at the changed component docs. Changed. A filter on component that only returns results the first time after they have been added or mutably dereferenced. Yada, yada, yada. I thought I could do with. Maybe not. Changed will do it. So query health changed mats. So for health children in query, do observers run more than once per frame? In the global sense, I believe they run immediately. So any number, like if you are talking about all observers across all instances, you can have multiple observers that run at different times during a frame, which means that yes, if something happens later in a frame, I believe that that observer will re-trigger. So there isn't like, as far as I'm aware, I'm still very new to observers. As far as I'm aware, there's no like observer listen thing, like there is for, you know, like apply state transition or something. Because observers happen basically right after the event does. That's kind of, as I'm gathering it, that's kind of the point. They happen immediately. So in that sense, I believe that if you have things that happen at different times during a frame, that those things will both trigger observers. As that's my current understanding, anyway. There is no like, they aren't commands. They don't run at the end of a frame, like that kind of thing. They're not deferred, I guess would be the proper way to say that. So health, children. Query colliders. Handle health bar material. So for health children in this, yeah, and not like event readers. Exactly. Like event readers would be kind of delayed and potentially batched, whereas observers, my understanding is they just run. So update health bar materials query for changed health. We need to go to the children of that query, of which there can be multiple. Can we iterate over children? I'm only going to have one of these, so not while let. Let's do children dot iter. Do we need to, or can we just go find? That's our entity. child health bar equals iter get. This returns result, I believe. This needs to be a shared reference, even though it's a handle. Can we find some okay? Let's find some. I feel like I always get that wrong. Rust find. I guess that is just fine. Like we can do. Like is okay, right? And then we need to dereference this twice. So we got the child health bar, which is an entity. Mats.get child health bar. This is going to have to be a mute at some point. So get mute. I think that was. I guess we'll do let some else continue. I feel like this should be a warning. Mats needs to be mutable if we're going to get mutable. So mute Mats to get mute child health bar. Child health bar is a shared reference to an entity. Why is it a shared reference to an entity? Oh, children.iter.find. Okay. That's why. I think we need to do find map. I don't think we actually want the entity. I think we want the handle to the health bar. So we go back to doing okay. And this is that now, and child is now only a single. So if let some child health bar, find map, okay. That code looks awkward to me, but I'm going to leave it for now. Then we have a handle, which is what we need here. And then we have a mutable health bar material. And then mat dot health percentage equals health. I guess I should just do get percent, right? And then we impl on health. This way I don't have to keep make sure that I do my division correctly all over the place. Let's see, self dot current over self dot total. Okay. Get mute doesn't need to mute there, or get percentage, health percentage. I think that works. I forget what else we were going to do. No, we already did the other thing. I was going to move the health bar up. Okay, so we've moved it up. It does not look like it's updating for whatever reason. So I either have not set up these queries correctly or something like that. Just do a little debugging. Okay, so it gets to health. It doesn't do this. I feel like I am updating the percentage. We're not using the percentage in the shader. The value is fine. We're not using it in the shader. Oh, that's one of those like, of course that's the issue. Okay. Mesh.uv.x. What is this? If mesh uvx is greater than material.health percentage, discard. I knew I was forgetting something. And now we just chunk their health down. Wow, this fireball we coded, or the fireball I coded, I'll take responsibility for this, is terrible in terms of being able to actually fire it. Cool. So we've got a health bar, and the health bar goes down, and we've got a shader to display the health, which is great. I'm happy with this overall. I think the health bars are probably, you know, like wrong in some way, but that's fine. At some point, this could be a texture, which would be kind of cool. I'll just leave Warren there, I guess. At least I'll know where it is if it happens. So observers are pretty cool. I don't know the best practices for them yet, but we basically implemented all of health through observers. So covering what we did, we added a health component to our punching bag. It has a child that is damageable. It's a collider that has damageable on it. So when a fireball is fired, it's doing some checks to see if it should do damage or not. If it should do damage, we're using the new observables trigger targets to fire a take damage event to the parent. So the collider gets hit, which is a child, and we want it to happen on the parent, which has the health component. So we fire take damage on the parent with the health component. That is all defined in this other file over here. We are observing damage. So this is our observer. Our observer has a trigger that listens for this take damage event, and it queries for all entities that have health, because we need to then update the health with the damage. We get the health using trigger.entity. We get trigger.event too if we need the event data. In this case, I'm hard coding it to subtract 1 from the health. And that's all that's happening in this update. The health is just ticking down by 1. Then we have a separate event, or not a separate event, a separate, I guess it is technically an event, a separate system that watches the change in health and propagates that to the material. I chose to do this as a system separately because I'm not quite sure what best practices are. So I'm falling back to semantically what I think this should do or how it should behave. And that is the damage needs to happen immediately. So it goes in the observer. But the visual representing the damage that has been done doesn't need to happen until, you know, the end of the frame. Even the next frame is fine, you know. Also, ideally, this is running at 60 or more frames a second. So, like, is somebody really going to notice a material that doesn't update for a single frame? Probably not. So I've kind of semantically, this can happen later. It's looser, and the health update needs to happen immediately. So that's why I left the health update here, whereas I did a system for the material update. The way that we have a health bar is really interesting because we also used component hooks here. So component hooks mean that all we have over here on the left is the collider, which has a position and a collider on it from Bevy XPBD, or avian physics, I guess is what it's going to be called now. And then we have this material mesh 2D, which is just a capsule. It's got a position. It's got a material with a tailwind, red 400, whatever. Doesn't matter. Texture atlas, some other stuff, rigid body. But we have this health component. So all we have to do the health bar is this health component. The health component is only responsible for storing the current and the total health. So when we implement component for health, we implement a hook for when a health component is added. What we do is we insert the health bar as a child on that entity. And then we reposition it to be the right height. So this component hook runs even before observers, immediately, right? If we're spawning this in, this happens immediately. It happens so fast, in fact, that we had a bug earlier where I was replacing the material mesh 2D that we defined here in spawn, and we actually never even saw this spawn. We just saw the health bar. So it's very, very, very immediate. You get access to the world. So the other thing that we figured out today is that this is a deferred world type. It is not a mutable world type. So you do need to access any kind of spawning through commands. So we do world.commands here. You can access resources and pre-existing things mutably using this deferred world. That's all fine. But if you're going to spawn things in, you kind of need to get the commands. We spawn in the material mesh 2D bundle with the health bar. And we add it as a child to the targeted entity. So now anything that has a health component on it also has a health bar. Flat out. Always. Guaranteed. Which is very cool. Because now we can kind of start attaching more functionality to these things. We don't actually need to do anything per se for this component implementation, because everything is defaulted except for register component hooks. And then we just have our observer running globally. Anything that can take damage will take damage. So that's all very, very exciting to me. That's my first time like really putting observers to work. It's definitely my first time putting component hooks to work. For anybody that wasn't here as well, the depth texture 2D work is working. It's not perfect. But you can go, so this archway is one image, which means I can be in front of it here and also behind it here, which I'm just endlessly excited about, because while the math isn't quite correct yet, there are still like areas where, should I really be behind that? Maybe, maybe not. You can kind of just run around this world and be behind things and in front of things. And like, I can stand behind the back corner of this archway, and I'm so excited about the depth stuff. Anyway, back to the health. So we've got this gigantic health bar, and this fireball that is z-indexed incorrectly. And then the shader is just handling chunking out the health. So we've got some percentage. We've got this shader. This shader is one of the simplest shaders you could possibly write. All that's happening here is we're passing in a color and a percentage of the bar that we need to keep filled. If the X position of the vertex output, so the UVs, UVs are 0 to 1, X and Y. If the X coordinate of the UV for the fragment that we're processing is greater than the health percentage, so let's say you have 50% health and you're at UV position 0.6. That gets discarded here, so it won't show. Otherwise, we return the material color. And that's it. Super simple shader. We aren't doing any depth processing here, but we could. I don't know why we would in this case. Unless we have to for some reason. But yeah. What's it? 11:15. I think that's it for the day. I think I'm really happy with that result. Observers usage, component hooks usage. We're on RC4. We're on RC4 now, so it should be fine when we go to stable. We'll still have to be on a fork of Bevy ECS tile map for a while because we have depth map changes. Even if they put out a release, we have a fork of Bevy as well that has the depth map changes. I keep calling it a depth map. That's not the right term. Anyway. Yeah. Thanks for hanging out, everyone. That's going to be it. And I'll be back on next Saturday morning, as usual.